My daughter disowned me and told me that her stepfather was the man she deserved. As to give myself some clarity, I decided to focus on my well-being. I began therapy, something I had long avoided because I thought I could handle my emotions on my own. My therapist helped me realize that while it's natural to love your children unconditionally, there's a line between love and enabling hurtful behavior. One session stood out. My therapist asked, "If your daughter were an adult friend treating you this way, would you tolerate it?" The answer was clear. I wouldn't. That realization was painful but necessary. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting disrespect indefinitely. I decided to adjust my financial plans. For years, I had set aside savings, investments, and a trust fund, ensuring that my daughter would be financially secure in the future. However, her recent behavior and her words forced me to reconsider. I wasn't trying to punish her, but it felt wrong to continue prioritizing her financially when she was rejecting me emotionally. So, I removed her as the primary beneficiary from my accounts. Instead, I updated my will to direct most of my assets to charitable organizations and a small portion to my sister, who had been my unwavering support through all of this. I left some for my daughter, but not as much as I had originally intended. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it also gave me a sense of relief. It felt like I was protecting myself from further heartbreak. When I told my sister about the decision, she was supportive. "You're not cutting her off," she reassured me. "You're setting boundaries. She'll understand someday, maybe not now, but eventually." I hope she was right. Months went by. My daughter's attitude didn't improve, and I tried to give her space while still showing her that I cared. I sent her birthday gifts, texted her occasionally, and always let her know she could talk to me whenever she was ready. But her responses were brief, and sometimes she didn't reply at all. Then came an unexpected turning point. One evening, my sister called me, her voice trembling with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Your daughter reached out to me." Apparently, my daughter had confided in her about feeling conflicted. She admitted that she had been unfair to me and that she missed the relationship we used to have. My sister didn't push her, but encouraged her to talk to me directly when she felt ready. A week later, my daughter showed up at my door unannounced. My heart raced as I opened it. She stood there, looking nervous and uncertain, like the little girl I used to know. "Can we talk?" she asked. I invited her in, and we sat down. For the first time in over a year, she opened up to me. She talked about how the divorce had made her feel lost and angry. She admitted that she had blamed me for the breakup of our family, even though she knew deep down that it wasn't entirely my fault. "I guess I just wanted someone to blame," she said, her voice breaking. "And you were the easiest target." Hearing her say those words was both heartbreaking and healing. I told her how much I loved her, how much I had missed her, and how deeply her words had hurt me. We cried together, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a glimmer of hope. But rebuilding our relationship wasn't going to be easy. Trust doesn't magically repair itself overnight. We agreed to take things one step at a time. We started meeting for lunch every other week, keeping our conversations light and positive. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. Despite this progress, I didn't immediately undo my decision to change my will and financial plans. I needed to see sustained effort on both our parts before I felt comfortable taking that step. I explained this to her, and to my surprise, she understood. "I don't want your money," she said. "I just want my dad back." Those words meant more to me than any apology. Over the next several months, our bond grew stronger. She started inviting me to her school events, asking for my advice on her art projects, and even spending weekends at my house. I saw glimpses of the daughter I had always known and loved. Eventually, I revisited my financial plans. This time, I involved her in the process. I told her that I wanted to leave a legacy for her, but I also wanted her to earn her own success. We talked about the importance of financial independence and responsibility, and she appreciated being included in the discussion. Looking back, this journey taught me some hard but valuable lessons. Love, even between a parent and child, isn't always enough to sustain a relationship. It takes effort, respect, and a willingness to heal old wounds. My daughter and I are still a work in progress, but we're moving in the right direction. And for now, that's enough. Family bonds may fracture, but with time, understanding, and a lot of patience, they can sometimes be mended. I'll always cherish the progress we've made and hope that one day she'll look back and see how much I've always loved her, even in the moments when it felt like I had to let her go. I decided to fulfill my legal and financial obligations until she turned 18, but nothing more. I stopped going out of my way to buy her gifts or plan special outings. I stopped trying to win her over. And, most significantly, I updated my financial accounts. For years, I had been saving for her college education, setting aside money in a dedicated fund. I had also named her as the primary beneficiary on my 401k and other accounts. But now, I removed her name and replaced it with my sister's. It wasn't an easy choice, but it felt like the right one. This decision wasn't made in a moment of anger or bitterness. It was the result of countless sleepless nights, hours of self-reflection, and the painful realization that I could no longer chase a bond that seemed one-sided. It felt as though I was pouring my energy into a relationship where I was only met with resistance and indifference. Over the next few months, I started to rebuild my life. My sister and I grew closer than ever. She's always been my rock, even when the world felt like it was crumbling around me. Now, I wanted to be there for her too. We started spending more time together, reminiscing about our childhood, sharing meals, and finally checking things off our bucket list. One of those bucket list items was a dream we had both talked about for years, but never thought we'd actually do: a 2-week trip to Europe. We visited Paris, Rome, and Athens, soaking in the history and culture, while leaving behind the emotional baggage I had carried for far too long. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was genuinely happy. But back home, things weren't as peaceful. My daughter seemed to notice the change in my behavior. At first, she didn't say anything, but I could tell she was curious. She would ask vague questions, like why I wasn't inviting her to our usual father-daughter outings, or why I seemed different. I kept my answers short, not wanting to reopen old wounds. Then, one day, she came over to my house unannounced. I was out running errands, so she let herself in with the spare key. While there, she decided to snoop around in my office. She found paperwork showing that her name was no longer listed as the primary beneficiary on my accounts. She also noticed the significant withdrawals I had made from her college fund. That evening, she confronted me. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "I've made some changes," I replied calmly, bracing myself for the storm that was coming. "Changes?" she yelled. "You were supposed to save that money for my future. How could you just take it away?" I took a deep breath, steadying my emotions. "You made it clear that you didn't want me in your life," I said. "You told me you preferred your stepdad and that I wasn't the father you deserved. That hurt more than you can imagine. I've decided to fulfill my obligations to you, but beyond that, I need to protect myself." Her face was a mix of anger and disbelief, her voice trembling as she replied, "So you're just abandoning me? Do you even care about me at all?" Of course I care, I said, my voice softening. But I can't keep trying to build a relationship where I'm not wanted. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the empty halls, leaving me with a deafening silence. I didn't know where she went, and for a moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to run after her, to apologize, to beg her to come back. But I didn't. I knew I had to stand my ground for my own sanity. A few days later, my ex-wife called. Her voice was laced with anger the moment I picked up. "What are you doing to our daughter?" she demanded. "She told me you're cutting her off financially. How could you do that?" "I'm not cutting her off," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I'm still fulfilling my legal obligations, but I won't keep giving beyond that when she's made it clear she doesn't respect or value me." "She's just a teenager," my ex shot back. "She doesn't mean the things she says." "Maybe," I said, "but words have consequences. She told me I wasn't the father she deserved. Do you have any idea how much that hurt?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she sighed. "You're destroying your relationship with her." "No," I said firmly. "She destroyed it when she chose to side with you and your affair. I wanted a relationship with her, but not at the cost of my self-respect." Without another word, she hung up, leaving me alone with the weight of my decision. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. My daughter and I were still estranged. I stuck to my plan, fulfilling my obligations but keeping my distance otherwise. She hadn't tried to reach out, and neither had I. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit in the quiet of my home and replay old memories in my mind. I missed the little girl who used to run into my arms and excitedly tell me about her day at school. I missed the way her face would light up when I surprised her with her favorite ice cream or took her to the park. Those moments felt like they belonged to another lifetime. But I also knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. The trust had been broken, and rebuilding it would require effort from both sides, effort I hadn't seen from her yet. My sister became my lifeline during this time. She reminded me that it was okay to prioritize my own well-being, to protect my heart from being repeatedly hurt. We spent more time together, finding joy in simple things like cooking dinner, watching movies, or planning our next adventure. One day, my sister said something that stuck with me. "You can love someone and still choose to let them go if they're hurting you. It doesn't mean you're giving up on them. It means you're choosing yourself." Her words gave me clarity. I wasn't abandoning my daughter. I was setting boundaries. I hoped that one day she would understand that. Then, one evening, I received a text from her. It was short and to the point. "Can we talk?" My heart raced as I read those words. Was she ready to mend the broken pieces of our relationship? Or was this another confrontation waiting to happen? I replied, agreeing to meet her the next day. When we met, her demeanor was different. She wasn't angry or accusatory. Instead, she seemed vulnerable, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "about how I made you feel. And I'm sorry." Her apology caught me off guard. For so long, I had braced myself for hostility that I hadn't allowed myself to hope for reconciliation. "I know I hurt you," she continued, tears welling up in her eyes. "I said things I didn't mean because I was angry and confused. But I do care about you, Dad, and I want to fix this." In that moment, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, hope, and a lingering sadness for all the time we had lost. "I want to fix this too," I said, my voice cracking. "But it's going to take time. We need to rebuild the trust that was broken." She nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of the bond we once shared. The road to healing wasn't easy. It required patience, forgiveness, and open communication. But for the first time, I felt like we were both willing to put in the effort. Looking back, I realized that setting those boundaries was the hardest but most necessary decision I've ever made. It taught me the importance of self-respect and the value of relationships built on mutual love and understanding. And while the scars of the past will always be there, they serve as a reminder of the resilience it takes to protect your heart, even when it's breaking.